The wound carved into Wachiwi's flesh wasn't just a message, it was a declaration of ownership, a brutal reminder that in Redemption Gulch, some lives were worth less than the gold beneath their feet. Reverend Hope Caldwell hadn't expected to find her there in that abandoned mine shaft, hadn't planned to ignore her desperate plea, "Please, don't lift my skirt." But the spreading bloodstain demanded attention. What he discovered beneath that torn fabric didn't just shatter his already fragile faith. It rewrote everything he thought he understood about God, justice, and his own purpose. As he gently wrapped his coat around her broken body, Hope knew two things with absolute certainty. Helping her would make him powerful enemies in a town where helping Indians was considered betrayal. And for the first time in years, he didn't give a damn about the consequences. Sometimes, standing for truth means blood on your hands and a target on your back. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Montana Territory, 1876. Summer heat shimmered across the parched landscape as Reverend Hope Caldwell approached Redemption Gulch, a mining settlement carved into the valley like an open wound in the earth. Dust clung to his boots, his threadbare clerical collar, and the Bible tucked under his arm, a book worn thin from handling yet rarely opened with genuine conviction these days. The abandoned church at the edge of town stood as neglected as his faith, windows broken, cross askew, pews shrouded in dust. Hope pushed open the creaking door and stood in the silence, watching motes dance in the shafts of light that cut through the gloom. Like his spirit, this place needed restoration, though he questioned whether either deserved the effort. "Can I help you, mister?" A voice startled him from his contemplation. Hope turned to find a wiry man with suspicious eyes. "I'm Reverend Caldwell. I've come to revive this church." The man assessed Hope's weathered face and prematurely graying beard. "Good luck with that. Folk here got more pressing concerns than salvation." Those pressing concerns became clear as Hope settled in. Everything in Redemption Gulch revolved around Blackwood Mining Company. Silas Blackwood's house loomed on the hillside above town, as imposing as the man's reputation. Sheriff Quentin Webb and his deputies patrolled as extensions of Blackwood's will rather than the law. Hope's first sermon attracted only 7 people, most seeking shelter from a sudden rain rather than spiritual guidance. He spoke the familiar words, each one turning to ash on his tongue. When had preaching become performance rather than purpose? At night, by lamplight, Hope wrote letters he never sent. Is faith merely words, or must it be something more to matter in this world? The question haunted him as he stared at the Montana sky, remembering battlefields where prayers had evaporated in cannon smoke. His third service brought a surprise, a young Lakota woman who slipped into the back pew. Her movements were careful, measured, as though in pain. Hope noticed bruises on her wrists when she reached for a hymnal. Before he could speak with her after the service, she vanished. "The Indian girl belongs to Blackwood," warned Meredith, the saloon owner, while offering Hope a free meal. "Men who take interest in her tend to disappear." When the Lakota woman, Wachiwi, he learned, appeared again the following Sunday, a young boy spat at her outside after the service while his mother watched approvingly. Hope intervened. "Preaching to savages now?" the mother sneered. "No wonder your collection plate is empty." Hope watched Wachiwi walk away, her dignity intact despite the town's casual cruelty, when she failed to appear for several Sundays. Concern gnawed at him. Most townsfolk turned away or warned him to mind his business when he asked about her. Only Eliza Thornfield, the spinster schoolteacher with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually worried expression, reluctantly offered information. "She sometimes seeks refuge in an abandoned mine shaft outside town," Eliza whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "But you didn't hear that from me." A violent thunderstorm broke the summer heat one evening. Lightning split the sky as Hope felt an inexplicable urgency. Grabbing his lantern, he made his way through driving rain to the abandoned mine. The journey was treacherous. He fell twice in the mud. Losing his lantern, lightning revealed a set of small footprints, partially washed away, leading into darkness. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of copper, both from the mine's metals and from blood. Hope called out softly, following labored breathing to a corner where a figure huddled. In a flash of lightning through the mine entrance, he saw her, Wachiwi, severely beaten, clothes torn, blood seeping from beneath her skirt. When he moved to help, she flinched away despite her weakness. "Please don't lift my skirt," she whispered, her voice breaking with shame and pain. But the spreading bloodstain demanded immediate attention. With deep reluctance and murmured apologies, Hope gently lifted the fabric and confronted horror beyond imagination. Carved into her flesh were the words, "savage whore," the cuts precise and deliberate. Beside this, a crude brand of Blackwood's Mining Company logo had been seared into her skin. Hope's remaining faith shattered in that moment, his belief in human decency crumbling as he confronted this calculated cruelty. Nausea rose in his throat, his vision blurring as the implications of such hatred became clear. This wasn't random violence, but a message, a declaration of ownership and power, fighting to control his revulsion. Hope removed his coat and wrapped it around Wachiwi. "I'm going to help you," he said, his voice finding a firmness that surprised him as he lifted her broken body. Hope understood that this act would likely make him enemies in a town where helping Indians was seen as betrayal. But for the first time in years, his purpose was absolutely clear, not in hollow sermons or empty rituals, but in this single act of defiance against deliberate evil. The storm raged as he carried Wachiwi back toward town, her blood soaking through his coat, her breathing shallow against his chest. The abandoned church waited, no longer just a symbol of his fading faith, but now a sanctuary where truth might find refuge in a town built on lies. For 3 days, Hope rarely left the small room behind the church where he'd created a makeshift sanctuary for Wachiwi. He used skills learned from an old field surgeon during the Civil War, cleaning wounds, applying poultices, and maintaining a quiet vigilance as fever threatened to claim her. The young woman drifted between consciousness and delirium, sometimes speaking in Lakota, sometimes in broken English. Hope discovered other scars and burns across her body, evidence of prolonged abuse. Each revelation strengthened his resolve while further eroding his conventional faith. Working by lamplight, he created a hidden entrance through a false wall, allowing Wachiwi to hide quickly if needed. His silver watch, a seminary graduation gift, became medical supplies from a traveling peddler who asked no questions but raised an eyebrow at the unusual purchases. While gathering herbs for poultices in a meadow beyond town, Hope sensed he was being watched. He turned to find an elderly Lakota woman observing him with sharp, evaluating eyes. "You treat the dancer," she said. Not a question, but a statement. Hope nodded, expecting hostility, but finding only cautious assessment in her gaze. "Show me your hands," she commanded. When Hope extended his palms, she examined them carefully before nodding. Healer's hands, but healing her brings danger to you. White preacher. I'm aware, Hope responded. Nahimana produced a small pouch of herbs. For infection and pain, make tea. Before leaving, she added, tomorrow, I come. Your medicine is good. Mine is better. True to her word. Nahimana arrived the next day through the back entrance Hope hadn't shown her. She brought additional medicines and assisted in treating Wachiwi's wounds, her movements efficient and practiced. As they worked, Nahimana revealed that Wachiwi was the last of her small band, the rest having been killed in a justified massacre after false accusations of stealing from miners. Blackwood wanted their land, she explained matter-of-factly. Easier to take from dead Indians. She told Hope that Blackwood had purchased Wachiwi from corrupt army officers 2 years ago and kept her captive since. She is educated by missionaries, speaks English, reads, writes, dangerous to men like Blackwood. Hope asked why Nahimana herself hadn't been targeted. The older woman's face showed a grim smile. They think I am ghost. My people officially extinct on paper. She produced a government document declaring her band no longer extant in the territory. A noise outside interrupted their conversation, boots on the church steps. Nahimana disappeared through the hidden entrance with surprising speed for her age, while Hope moved to intercept the visitors. Sheriff Quentin Webb stood in the church doorway, flanked by 2 deputies. The older deputy, Reese, had a reputation for brutality, while the younger one, William Hayes, looked uncomfortable in his role. Afternoon, preacher, Webb drawled, pointedly wiping his boots on the Bible Hope had placed at the entrance. We're looking for stolen property belonging to Mr. Blackwood. The only property here belongs to the church, Hope responded calmly, though his heart pounded. Mind if we look around? Webb didn't wait for permission, nodding to his deputies to begin searching. As they approached the door to Hope's private quarters, he moved to block them. I have a parishioner recovering from fever in there. She can't be disturbed. This parishioner have a name? Webb's hand rested meaningfully on his gun. Her privacy is my concern as her pastor. Hope stood his ground. Webb's eyes narrowed. Harboring a runaway is a serious offense. Preacher. So is threatening a man of God in his own church, Hope countered, his voice steady despite his fear. The confrontation escalated until Hope played his desperate card. I've written detailed letters about the town's corruption to former Army comrades and newspapers back east, to be delivered if anything happens to me. His hands shook slightly, revealing the bluff. Nevertheless, Webb hesitated, then signaled his men to withdraw. This isn't over. Preacher. Blackwood doesn't appreciate people taking what's his. After they left, Hope returned to find Wachiwi awake and alert, having heard everything. They will kill you because you have seen, she warned, her voice stronger than before. Blackwood marks what belongs to him. You don't belong to anyone, Hope responded firmly. Wachiwi's eyes, dark with both pain and resilience, studied his face. Why do you help me? Your God teaches love for enemies. I am not your enemy, but helping me makes you enemies. Hope considered this, realizing he hadn't prayed since finding her in the mine. Maybe true faith isn't about words, he finally said. Maybe it's about what you do when faced with cruelty. That night, Hope found a dead bird on the church steps, a warning. The sheriff's visit convinced several regular churchgoers to stop attending Hope's services, isolating him further in the community. Yet the next morning, a basket of food appeared at the back door, a silent indication that not everyone supported Blackwood's regime. As Wachiwi's strength gradually returned, she began to share her story, She spoke haltingly, often switching between English and Lakota when describing traumatic events. Hope learned phrases in her language to comfort her during difficult moments, creating a bridge of communication beyond English. "They taught me to read white man's laws," she explained, "so I knew when Blackwood broke them." She described witnessing Blackwood, Sheriff Webb, and several officials forcing Lakota families from their land by fabricating crimes, then claiming the land contained gold deposits, when other witnesses disappeared. Wachiwi attempted to reach the territorial governor with evidence, but was captured on the trail. "Blackwood made example of me," she said, her voice flat with the effort of controlling emotion. "He led his men." She paused, unable to continue for a moment. "Then he personally carved the words and branded me. He said everyone should see what happens to savages who don't know their place." That night, after Wachiwi fell asleep, Hope experienced a profound crisis of faith. He stepped outside the church and looked up at the vast Montana sky, stars brilliant in the darkness. "Is this what you want?" he whispered fiercely to the heavens. "Your children tortured while those who claim to serve justice profit from suffering? What kind of God allows this?" No answer came except the night wind through pine trees. Hope realized he'd been asking the wrong questions. The issue wasn't God's will but human choice, including his own. By morning, he'd made a decision. His faith in religious institutions might be broken, but his belief in moral action remained intact. He would help Wachiwi escape and expose Blackwood, regardless of the cost. When Nahimana visited again, Hope shared his resolution. The medicine woman studied him thoughtfully before speaking. "Your God has not abandoned you. You just couldn't hear him through the lies of those who claim to speak for him." As Hope and Nahimana discussed next steps, Wachiwi made an unexpected request. "Teach me to shoot a gun." The request startled Hope, revealing his unconscious assumption that she would remain passive. Nahimana smiled approvingly as Wachiwi explained, "I will not be victim again. Next time, I fight." Hope recognized he couldn't protect Wachiwi or expose Blackwood alone. He began cautiously seeking allies, starting with Eliza Thornfield, the school teacher who had directed him to the mine. He approached her after school hours, but she refused to meet at the church, suggesting instead the small cemetery where they were less likely to be observed. "I've always kept my head down," Eliza admitted, nervously adjusting her spectacles. "Teaching is my calling, and I can't help children if I'm driven out." Despite her fear, she revealed she'd been secretly teaching Native children to read despite town prohibitions, a punishable offense under Blackwood's unofficial rule. "Why risk it?" Hope asked. "My father was an abolitionist," she explained. "He taught me that neutrality in the face of oppression only serves the oppressor." Eliza agreed to help and introduced Hope to Isaiah Freeman, a formerly enslaved man who worked as the town blacksmith. Isaiah's smithy sat at the edge of town, the rhythmic hammering a constant backdrop to their conversation. Isaiah tested Hope with pointed questions about his views on slavery and the treatment of freed people after the war. "Words are cheap." "Preacher," he said bluntly. "Especially from white men who claim to speak for God." Hope didn't defend himself, but simply stated, "I'm not asking you to believe in me or my God. I'm asking you to help someone who's suffering under the same kind of ownership you escaped." Isaiah considered this, then rolled up his sleeve to reveal scars from whipping. "Ownership leaves marks," he said quietly. "I've seen how Blackwood treats that girl." This created a moment of connection, Isaiah recognizing the parallel between his experience and Wachiwi's. He agreed to help, offering his smithy as a safer hiding place. "I built a hidden room during the war," he explained. "Helped folks heading north on the Underground Railroad. Still comes in handy sometimes." As they moved Wachiwi to the smithy that night, they nearly encountered a patrol of Blackwood's men. They ducked into a narrow alley, but Wachiwi stumbled, still weak from her injuries. The noise attracted attention, and a voice called out, "Who's there?" To their surprise, it was the young deputy, William Hayes, alone on patrol. He shined his lantern directly at them, clearly recognizing Hope, but after a long moment, he deliberately turned away, calling out, "Must have been a cat," to his distant companions. This unexpected moment of conscience from someone in Blackwood's employ suggested potential cracks in the regime's loyalty. Hope made a mental note of Hayes as someone who might be turned to their cause. With Wachiwi safely installed in Isaiah's hidden room, they expanded their coalition to include telegraph operator Clayton Matthews. Initially reluctant, Clayton changed his mind after witnessing Blackwood's men beating an elderly Lakota man for trespassing on what had been his people's land for generations. "I see the telegrams," Clayton told them in a hushed meeting at the smithy. "Messages to the governor about Indian troubles that never happened. Reports of attacks that were actually Blackwood's men dressed as Lakota. I kept copies." He produced several yellow papers from inside his coat, evidence of the fabricated narrative being created to justify violence against the Lakota. Hope was stunned by the scope of the deception. "We need to get these to federal authorities who aren't in Blackwood's pocket." Their growing coalition suffered its first setback when Blackwood's men burned down the church in the middle of the night. The fire was set during a rare summer rainstorm, requiring coal oil to keep it burning, showing the deliberate effort. The church bell fell during the fire, cracking completely as it hit the ground, a symbol of broken communication between Hope and his former faith. Several townspeople gathered to watch, but did nothing to stop the blaze. Hope observed from hiding in Isaiah's smithy, clutching his clerical collar while the flames consumed what had been his sanctuary. The message was clear. Blackwood knew Hope was helping Wachiwi and would tolerate no interference. The next morning, Deputy Hayes investigated the fire and deliberately reported that it was likely caused by lightning, not arson, another small indication of his divided loyalties. After the fire, some townspeople secretly left food and supplies at the smithy door, showing silent support existed even if people were too afraid to stand openly against Blackwood, emboldened by the growing evidence and support. Hope ventured with Isaiah to an abandoned mining claim where, according to Clayton's information, they might find more documentation of Blackwood's land swindles. They discovered surveyors' stakes with falsified dates and altered claim markers, physical evidence of the fraud Wachiwi had described. As they prepared to leave with this evidence, the crack of a rifle split the air. A bullet kicked up dirt near Hope's feet, a warning shot. Before they could take cover, they were surrounded by Blackwood's men, faces covered with flour sack masks. "Mr. Blackwood would like a word with you, preacher," one man said, voice muffled by his mask. "Seems I'm popular these days," Hope responded, trying to keep his voice steady while looking for an escape route. The men separated Hope from Isaiah, forcing the blacksmith to watch as they beat Hope methodically. Through swollen eyes, Hope recognized some of his attackers by their boots and voices, though he couldn't see their faces. "You should have stuck to saving souls," one man said, landing a particularly vicious blow to Hope's ribs. Another whispered an apology before delivering a strike that left Hope gasping on the ground. The leader of the group pulled out a knife and heated it in a small fire they'd built. Mr. Blackwood wants you to carry a reminder of what happens to men who meddle where they don't belong." They held Hope down and used the heated knife to carve "Preacher man should pray, not meddle" into his chest, cauterizing as they cut to ensure he survived to deliver the message. The pain was beyond anything Hope had experienced, even in war. He hallucinated his seminary professor watching disapprovingly as he screamed. When they finished, the leader leaned close. "Next time, we won't stop with a warning." They released Isaiah, who had been forced to watch the entire ordeal, and rode away, leaving Hope bleeding in the dirt. With evidence of Blackwood's planned atrocities in hand and time running short, Hope and his allies developed a plan to smuggle Wachiwi out of Redemption Gulch to testify to federal authorities. They chose the night of the miners' monthly payday when the saloons would be full and the town distracted by drunken revelry. Isaiah constructed a false bottom in a supply wagon, normally used to transport mining equipment but now repurposed for their escape. The hidden compartment was tight, but would conceal Wachiwi for the journey to the nearest federal outpost. 2 days hard travel away, Eliza prepared documents identifying Wachiwi as her native assistant, should they be questioned by patrols outside Blackwood's immediate influence. As dusk approached, tension mounted in the smithy. Hope gave Wachiwi his most valuable possession, a compass that belonged to his father. "To find your way home," he told her. The moment carried unexpected emotional weight for both of them. For disguise, Wachiwi cut her hair short and dressed as a young white boy, with clothes provided by Eliza. The transformation was startling, her natural dignity somehow shining through despite the ill-fitting garments. "Blackwood looks for Lakota woman," she said with grim humor, "not white boy." Hope would drive the wagon with Eliza beside him as cover. A preacher escorting the schoolteacher to a neighboring settlement for supplies seemed innocent enough. Isaiah would remain behind to destroy any evidence of their involvement and maintain appearances. As they made final preparations, Deputy William Hayes appeared at the smithy door, causing everyone to freeze. He raised his hands to show he was alone and unarmed. "I know what you're planning," he said quietly. "The patrols have been doubled tonight." Hope studied him warily. "Why tell us this?" "Not everyone in this town agrees with Blackwood." Hayes responded, "My mother was half Cherokee. Blackwood doesn't know." This revelation shifted their understanding of the young deputy's reluctance during previous encounters. Hayes offered to guide them past the patrols via a lesser-known trail, explaining he was on duty that night specifically to watch that route. After debate among themselves, they cautiously accepted his help, seeing little alternative. Hope sensed truth in the young man's words, though Isaiah remained deeply suspicious. They modified their plan to leave an hour later when Hayes would be on patrol at the southern edge of town. The night was moonless as they set out, the wagon moving slowly to minimize noise. They met Hayes at the arranged spot, and he guided them toward a narrow trail that wound through pine forest south of town. "Once you're past the ridge, head southeast," Hayes instructed. "You'll hit the stage road by morning." As they moved deeper into the forest, the trail narrowed. Hayes rode ahead to scout, then returned with news that the way was clear. Relief began to replace tension. They might actually succeed. Then Hayes made a fatal mistake. He called Wachiwi by her Lakota name, which he had claimed not to know. Isaiah realized the trap first. "He's betrayed us," he hissed, reaching for his weapon. Too late. Whistles pierced the night as lanterns flared around them. They were surrounded by Blackwood's men, with Sheriff Webb at their center. "Well done. "Deputy," Webb said, tossing Hayes a coin. "Mr. Blackwood will be pleased." Hayes couldn't meet Hope's eyes. "My mother's medicine," he mumbled. "They would have let her die." Chaos erupted as Hope and Isaiah attempted to fight their way out. Eliza, showing unexpected courage, pushed Wachiwi toward a gap in the encirclement. "Run!" she shouted. A shot rang out. Eliza crumpled, blood blooming on her shoulder where she took a bullet meant for Wachiwi. The schoolteacher's sacrifice gave Wachiwi momentary advantage, but as she fled into the darkness, more of Blackwood's men emerged from hiding. Hope watched in despair as Wachiwi was captured, fighting fiercely but outnumbered. Isaiah managed to create enough distraction for Hope to escape into the forest, but they were separated in the confusion. As Hope fled, Wachiwi's voice carried through the trees, "Remember your promise." She referred to an earlier vow that he wouldn't die for her, but live to continue fighting. Dawn found Hope hiding in a ravine, injured and alone. He'd failed catastrophically. Wachiwi recaptured, Eliza wounded, Isaiah missing, and the evidence still hidden in the false bottom of the seized wagon. The only small mercy was that Hope had kept Ezekiel's documents separate, tucked inside his boot. After hours of cautious movement, Hope encountered Isaiah, who had also evaded capture. The blacksmith's face was grim. "They're taking Wachiwi back to town. Heard them say Blackwood has special plans for her. A public example." Hope's heart sank at these words. "And Eliza? Wounded but alive. They're holding her at the jail." They assessed their desperate situation. 2 men against Blackwood's small army, with Wachiwi and Eliza captive. Returning to town meant certain capture or death. "We need help," Hope acknowledged, "and I know only one person who might still be able to provide it." Isaiah nodded in understanding. "The old medicine woman." They set out for the wilderness beyond town, seeking Nahimana's hidden camp that Wachiwi had described. Their journey was hazardous. They had to avoid search parties while traversing unfamiliar terrain with minimal supplies. Hope's chest wounds broke open during the difficult travel. Leaving a trail of blood they worked desperately to conceal. The journey to Nahimana's hidden camp required crossing a swift river where Hope nearly drowned. His strength depleted by injury and exhaustion, Isaiah pulled him from the current, the symbolic baptism marking Hope's final transformation from man of words to man of action. They found Nahimana's camp concealed in a network of caves beneath a rocky outcropping. The medicine woman showed no surprise at their arrival, as if she had been expecting them. "The dancer is captured again," she stated as she applied poultices to Hope's reopened wounds. "Yes," Hope confirmed. "We failed her." Nahimana's expression remained impassive. "Failure is only final if you accept it as such." She worked in silence for a moment before adding, "Blackwood plans public killing. 3 days from now, new moon." Hope exchanged alarmed looks with Isaiah. "How do you know this?" "I have ears in town. Not all white men see Indians as invisible." She pointed to a young Lakota man tending the fire. "My grandson brings news. Blackwood has put the dancer in cage in town square. Says she will be executed for inciting rebellion when moon is dark." The next days passed in a blur of healing and preparation. Nahimana treated them with a mixture of compassion and stern efficiency, calling Hope foolish but brave. Her medicines worked with surprising speed, drawing infection from his wounds and restoring his strength. During this time, Hope formally removed his clerical collar, preserved despite everything, and buried it in a small ceremony led by Nahimana, The ritual marked his final separation from his former identity as Reverend Caldwell. Isaiah discovered unexpected connections between African spiritual practices he learned from his grandmother and Lakota ceremonies, building a bridge of understanding with Nahimana's people. He worked with the young Lakota men, teaching them to strengthen their bows with metal techniques from his smithy. Hope and Isaiah trained with traditional Lakota weapons, with Hope initially resistant but eventually embracing new ways of fighting. Each night, Nahimana told sacred stories around the fire, expanding Hope's spiritual understanding beyond Christianity. On the second night, after drinking a ceremonial tea, Hope experienced a vision that clarified his purpose. He saw himself standing between worlds, the white settlers' world and the Lakota world, belonging fully to neither but serving both. In the vision, he carried not a Bible but a mirror that reflected truth back to those who looked into it. The message became clear. His role was not to preach, but to make others see reality without distortion. When Hope described this vision to Nahimana, she nodded approvingly. You understand now, the greatest power is not in changing others, but in showing them their true selves. On the morning of the third day, they prepared to return to Redemption Gulch. Isaiah had crafted a special knife that combined his metalworking with Lakota design, a symbol of their alliance. The young Lakota men would create diversions around town, drawing away some of Blackwood's forces. Before they left, Nahimana painted traditional protection symbols on their faces. Hope did not wipe them off despite his religious upbringing, another sign of his transformed understanding. Remember, Nahimana told him, your God sent his son to suffer with people, not to lecture them from safety. Perhaps he sent you for the same purpose. These words resonated deeply with Hope, offering a reconciliation between his former faith and his new understanding. He realized his crisis of faith wasn't about God's absence, but about humanity's failure to embody divine compassion, a failure he had participated in through empty sermons. As they prepared to depart, unexpected allies arrived, 3 miners who had occasionally attended Hope's services. They explained that conditions in town had deteriorated since Blackwood captured Wachiwi. His men were enforcing brutal new restrictions, claiming the need for protection against Indian uprising. We've had enough, one miner explained. Blackwood doesn't own us, whatever he thinks. This small reinforcement provided crucial information about guard rotations and a hidden entrance to town through an old mining tunnel. The resistance was growing beyond Hope's original allies, suggesting Blackwood's control was not as absolute as it appeared. They returned to find Redemption Gulch transformed into an armed camp. Blackwood's men patrolled the streets, and a curfew had been imposed. In the town square stood a bear cage, normally used for town celebrations, now holding Wachiwi. Blackwood had dressed her in a parody of white women's clothing, torn and soiled, to further humiliate her. Despite her injuries, Wachiwi sat tall in the cage, refusing food or water from her captors. Hope observed from hiding that she had methodically braided small sections of the cage with threads from her clothing, an act of defiance and cultural expression even in captivity. Blackwood had posted scripture verses about subduing the heathen on the cage, perverting religion to justify cruelty. Hope noticed that Wachiwi had been positioned to face the burned church ruins, a psychological torture meant to break her spirit, several times daily. Blackwood gave speeches about the savage threat, using Wachiwi as a prop to incite fear among the townspeople. However, Hope also noticed small acts of resistance, water left near the cage at night, women averting their eyes from the spectacle, children placing wildflowers within Wachiwi's reach when guards were distracted. When Wachiwi spotted Hope watching from hiding, she gave no sign of recognition, protecting him through her silence. Her courage despite suffering strengthened Hope's resolve to end Blackwood's reign of terror. That night, as they finalized their rescue plan, Clayton, the telegraph operator, found them in their hiding place. He brought critical news. The U.S. Marshals finally responded to my messages. They're on their way, but won't arrive until tomorrow evening. This timing meant the Marshals would arrive just after Blackwood's planned execution of Wachiwi. This information created a strategic dilemma. If they acted immediately to save Wachiwi, they risked losing the official intervention that could permanently end Blackwood's power. If they waited for the Marshals, Wachiwi would die. Hope made the decision. We move tonight. We expose Blackwood's crimes to the entire town before the Marshals arrive. If we succeed, they'll find witnesses ready to testify rather than a murdered woman and a town too frightened to speak. The plan crystallized. Isaiah would create diversionary fires at strategic locations while Hope confronted Blackwood directly, forcing a public reckoning. Clayton would ensure the evidence reached the Marshals regardless of what happened to Hope or Isaiah. This isn't just about saving one woman anymore, Hope told them. It's about saving the soul of this town. Under cover of darkness, they set their plan in motion. Isaiah placed carefully controlled fires at the lumberyard, stables, and Blackwood's storehouse, locations that would draw men away from the town center without endangering residents. The fires were positioned to cut off routes between Blackwood's allies but ensure civilian safety. As alarm bells sounded and Blackwood's men rushed to control the blazes, Hope used a secret passage that Ezekiel had revealed before his death, a hidden entrance to Blackwood's office through the building's cellar. Originally used to smuggle prostitutes upstairs without public knowledge, the office was opulently decorated with native artifacts perversely displayed as trophies, sacred objects treated as decorations. Hope found Blackwood and Sheriff Webb drinking expensive brandy while marking maps with expendable Lakota settlements and calculating profits from land seizures. Hope emerged from the shadows, Ezekiel's document in hand. "Gentlemen, I believe this meeting is about to be adjourned permanently." Blackwood's surprise quickly turned to contempt. "The persistent preacher returns. I thought our last message would have been clearer." He gestured to his own chest, mocking Hope's carved wounds. "Oh, your message was received," Hope responded, his voice steady. "It just didn't have the effect you intended." Webb drew his gun, but Hope was prepared. "I wouldn't. Isaiah has positioned men around the building. One shot, and this place burns like the others." It was a bluff, but effective enough to give Webb pause. "What do you want?" Blackwood demanded. "Justice?" Hope answered simply. "And I'm going to have it, one way or another." Blackwood laughed. "Justice? In a mining town? Don't be naive, preacher. We make our own justice here." "That ends tonight," Hope declared, revealing Ezekiel's document. "I have proof of your planned atrocities against the Lakota, proof of bribes, land theft, and murder." Blackwood's composure slipped momentarily before he regained control. "Interesting document. Unfortunately, it will be your word against mine. And in this town, my word is law. That's why we're taking this public," Hope announced. "Right now, the town is gathering in the square because of the fires. They're going to hear the truth, all of it." Hope forced Blackwood and Webb at gunpoint toward the town square, where indeed a crowd had gathered, initially to organize firefighting, but now watching in confusion as their leader was marched forward under duress. The confrontation that followed became the crucible in which Redemption Gulch's future would be forged. Hope forced Blackwood to stand before Wachiwe's cage, creating a powerful visual contrast between power and its victim. "People of Redemption Gulch," Hope called out, his voice carrying across the square. "You've lived under lies long enough." He produced the documents, land deeds with forged signatures, telegrams fabricating Indian attacks, Blackwood's ledger showing payments to officials. "Your prosperity is built on stolen land and spilled blood," the crowd murmured uneasily. Some called out in Blackwood's defense, while others listened intently. Hope continued relentlessly, cutting open his own shirt to show the carved words on his chest, then turning to Wachiwe's cage. "This is what power without mercy does," he declared. "This is what happens when we call others savage while committing savage acts." He used Blackwood's ceremonial key to unlock Wachiwe's cage, a symbolic reversal of power. As she stepped out, dignity intact despite her ordeal, Hope addressed the town's children specifically during his speech, asking them to remember this day when they made their own moral choices. The town's reaction divided along economic lines. Poorer residents turned against Blackwood first, while those who benefited from his corruption stood with him. The mood shifted decisively when a mother recognized her missing son's watch among Blackwood's possessions, realizing her child was likely murdered rather than killed by Indians as reported. Wachiwe spoke publicly for the first time, first in Lakota, which few understood, and then translating to English, asserting her right to be heard in her own language first. Her testimony about the methodical destruction of her people carried moral authority that even Blackwood's supporters found difficult to dismiss. The confrontation reached its climax as dust appeared on the horizon. The town's children noticed it first, pointing and shouting. The U.S. Marshals had arrived earlier than expected, guided by Clayton's assistant, who had ridden out to meet them. Seeing his power crumbling, Blackwood made a desperate final move. He pulled a hidden derringer from his boot, a weapon known for being dishonorable but effective at close range, and aimed at Wachiwe, seeing her testimony as the greatest threat to his empire. "If I fall, you fall with me, savage," he snarled. Hope didn't consciously decide to step in front of Wachiwe. His body moved on instinct, surprising him as much as others. The bullet struck him in the same shoulder that bore a scar from his Civil War service, creating a physical connection between his past and present sacrifices. As Hope staggered from the impact, Isaiah subdued Blackwood with a strike from a tool made from the melted church cross, completing its transformation from symbol to action. The Marshals rode into this tableau of violence and revelation. Their arrival transformed the dynamic immediately. External authority, not subject to Blackwood's influence, had finally reached Redemption Gulch. As Blackwood was restrained, he attempted to reassert control through familiar channels, offering to bribe the Marshals with the same amount he previously paid the sheriff. His open corruption in front of witnesses confirmed everything Hope had claimed. "You've destroyed everything I built here." Blackwood spat at Hope as he was led away. Hope, bleeding but conscious, responded with quiet certainty. "You built on blood and lies. Now we'll see what grows from truth." The Marshals initially dismissed Wachiwe's testimony until several townspeople, including Clayton and even Deputy Hayes, stepped forward to confirm her account, their consciences finally overcoming their fear. The collective witness marked the beginning of the town's moral recovery. Hope refused immediate medical attention, insisting on staying conscious to witness Blackwood's arrest. prioritizing justice over his own comfort. Only after Blackwood, Webb, and their key supporters were secured did he allow Nahimana to tend his wound. "You know," he told Wachiwi weakly as his shoulder was bandaged, "I'm starting to think God has a strange sense of humor. Every time I try to help you, I end up bleeding." Her smile, small but genuine, was the first Hope had seen from her, a precious indication that healing, for both of them, might truly be possible. 1 year after Hope's arrival in Redemption Gulch, the town commemorated its transformation with a gathering that included both settlers and Lakota representatives. The event wasn't a triumphant celebration, but a thoughtful reflection on how far they'd come and how far they still must go. The physical landscape reflected these changes. The town's name sign had been modified to acknowledge on Lakota land. The burned church had been rebuilt but served as a school where Eliza taught both settler and native children. Hope's small cabin between communities had expanded to include a meeting space where people from both cultures could gather informally. Hope no longer wore his clerical collar, having found more authentic spiritual expression through practical action than formal religious role. He worked regularly with Isaiah at the smithy, finding purpose in creating tools for cooperation rather than preaching abstract principles. The former preacher had become something between mediator, historian, and moral compass for the evolving community. Wachiwi had established herself as an essential bridge between cultures, respected by both for her intelligence, courage, and commitment to truth. Her position as official translator gave her unprecedented influence for a Native woman in territorial affairs. The scars Blackwood inflicted remained visible when she chose not to cover them, transformed from marks of shame to evidence of survival that commanded respect. The relationship between Hope and Wachiwi had deepened into something neither traditional marriage nor conventional friendship. They maintained separate households but shared daily life and purpose. Their connection, forged in trauma and strengthened through shared commitment to justice, transcended standard categories, a fitting symbol for the community's own transformation beyond traditional boundaries. Isaiah's expanded smithy had become a cooperative workshop where he trained apprentices from both communities, creating economic interdependence that reinforced political cooperation. His position on the town council had expanded to include mentoring other former slaves who had heard of Redemption Gulch as a place of unusual opportunity. Nahimana continued teaching traditional medicine to both Lakota youth and interested settlers, preserving cultural knowledge while selectively sharing it with respectful outsiders. Her role had evolved from isolated preserver of tradition to active transmitter of living cultural heritage, ensuring Lakota wisdom survived in adapted forms. These individual transformations reflected the community's larger evolution, from exploitation to cooperation, from cultural erasure to cultural exchange, from injustice justified by power to justice founded on truth. The process remained incomplete and sometimes fragile, but its direction had been firmly established. On a spring evening, Hope sat with Wachiwi on the porch of his cabin, watching sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. Children from both communities played together in the distance, their easy interaction a testament to how quickly younger generations adapted to new possibilities. "Do you miss being a preacher?" Wachiwi asked, revisiting a question she'd posed before. Hope considered thoughtfully before answering. "I haven't stopped preaching," he replied. "I'm just using actions instead of words now." His hand unconsciously touched the scar on his chest, now a badge of commitment rather than mark of violation. The wounds Blackwood inflicted meant to silence truth. Instead became its most powerful testimony, physical evidence that could not be denied or explained away. "Your scars speak truth, mine cannot," Wachiwi observed, her hand briefly touching her own hidden marks. "You chose yours by standing against injustice. Mine were forced upon me. Yet you transformed them into strength." Hope responded, "You could have hidden them forever, but instead you showed them as evidence others had to believe." This exchange captured their shared understanding that trauma need not define them, that wounds could become witnesses, that suffering could be transformed, though never erased. Their scars, like Hope's faith and Wachiwi's cultural identity, had not disappeared but evolved into something stronger and more authentic through crisis. As darkness fell, they lit a lantern together, its glow illuminating the path between their communities, a path once marked by fear and separation. Now, a route of regular exchange and cooperation. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. Light created together, revealing connection where darkness once suggested division. Hope opened the leather-bound book Wachiwi had given him months earlier, now half filled with names, stories, and reflections. This record-keeping had become his new ministry, preserving truth as foundation for justice, ensuring memory outlasted power. He began that evening's entry not with abstract principles, but with concrete observations of small changes that indicated larger transformation. Today, Isaiah's Lakota apprentice completed his first independent project, Tools for the New Community Garden. Eliza's students presented translations of traditional stories in both languages. Nahimana treated the banker's child with medicine that succeeded where the doctor's treatments failed. These practical details mattered more to Hope now than theological concepts or religious rituals. He had found faith not in doctrines about distant heaven, but in the difficult, necessary work of creating justice on earth, the daily choices that gradually built a community worthy of its name. As Hope wrote, Wachiwi sat beside him, occasionally suggesting details he might include or correcting his understanding of Lakota perspectives. Their collaboration on this historical record symbolized their broader partnership in building a future neither could create alone, a future that honored truth, respected difference, and recognized our shared humanity as the most sacred reality of all. In this quiet moment of documentation and reflection, Hope recognized that his crisis of faith hadn't ended in abandonment of belief, but in its transformation and deepening. The God he once preached about in abstract terms now seemed present in the concrete reality of human courage, resilience, and capacity for justice against all odds. "You know," Hope observed as he completed the day's entry, "when I found you in that mine, I thought I'd lost my faith. Now I realize I was just beginning to find it." Wachiwi nodded in understanding. Sometimes we must lose what we think we believe to discover what we truly believe. This wisdom, bridging their different spiritual traditions, captured the essence of Hope's journey, from hollow preaching to authentic living. From words about justice to its embodiment through action, his transformation paralleled Redemption Gulch's own evolution from place of exploitation to community of possibility. The story ended as Hope closed his book and they sat together in companionable silence, watching stars emerge above the mountains. Their work remained unfinished, the community's transformation incomplete, the larger society still resistant to the changes they represented. Yet in this moment, the fragile light they'd kindled together seemed sufficient illumination for the next step forward, And perhaps that was all any faith could truly promise. In the quiet moments between darkness and dawn, truth finds its voice. This story reminds us that faith is not measured in sermons or scripture, but in the courage to stand against injustice when silence would be safer. The deepest wounds can become our most powerful testimony, scars that speak truths no words could capture. Perhaps we all exist in that liminal space between worlds, belonging fully to neither but serving both. Our purpose revealed not through grand declarations, but through daily choices to witness suffering without turning away, to extend hands across divides others claim cannot be crossed. The most sacred text may be the one we write together through actions that honor our shared humanity. Real transformation of self, of community, of history itself begins not with perfect solutions, but with the simple, defiant refusal to accept cruelty as inevitable or power as unquestionable. In the end, perhaps that is all any faith can truly promise, not certainty, but the courage to take the next step forward, guided by the fragile light we kindle together. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Your presence here creates a community where these stories can breathe and grow. We'd love to hear which moments resonated most deeply with you in the comments below. Subscribe and follow along as we continue exploring the quiet heroism of those who choose truth when lies would be simpler.